Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dal. Earlier in the week, we took a closer look at some of the changes upcoming for the class of Warlock in the newest build for the War Within beta. At the time, however, of us taking a look at all of these changes, we didn't really get a chance to actually try them, but we're talking about the hypotheticals and what these changes could potentially do for the spec. Essentially, it was just a bunch of buffs all across the board, which is what we like to see. However, it looks like Warlocks have figured out a new build, not based on the newer changes, well, partially, but rather a new way for them to cycle out their soul shards to really fully stretch out the buffs that have been given to the Diabolist playstyle. And Destruction Warlocks found themselves in quite a situation where they're finding a playstyle that's a little bit more degen, where you ignore core abilities such as Chaos Bolt to unleash far more damage than ever imaginable. And in today's video, I really just want to take a look at what exactly led up to the two Warlock changes and could it be fixed going forward. As always, if you guys want to see more regular class updates like these for the War Within beta, be sure to follow the channel and subscribe. Otherwise, let's dive right in. One of the best parts of experiencing the next expansion in the alpha or the beta period is the ability to test out and play some of the more broken classes that are, for one reason or another, doing way too much damage than everybody else. Might be because of a bug or because of a weird interaction that is definitely not intended. And destruction in the current state is exactly one of those perfect examples. So the current version of Destro gameplay is very soul shard heavy. This allows you to execute quite a bunch of damage thanks to your hero specs. Primarily as Diabolist, some Warlocks were able to do some stuff with the Hellcaller for one of their hero specs or one of their hero talents specifically, but Diabolist for the most part is not the biggest offender, because I don't want to make it sound like Diabolist is the problem. I think it's just destruction and its soul shard spending allows Diabolist to be, I guess, exacerbated to some degree. So the Warlock problem right now, as it stands, is Warlocks are designed around building and spending soul shards. And one of the spending aspects of soul shards is to find as much value as possible from each soul shard that you spend. However, currently right now, it's not about how you spend your soul shards. It's about spending as many soul shards as possible, quantity over quality. So some of the changes that have happened recently that kind of led up to this is Diabolist receiving a massive improvement for both Demo and Destro. All of the demons that you get to summon from your Overlord to the Chaos Mother to the Pit Lord, all of them have been drastically improved. Fel Lord's ability of Fel Seeker improved by 360%, while the ability of Ruination buffed by 70%. That's a pretty big meteor, that's a lot of damage, and overall, quite a bit of your overall output with a lot of these abilities. Then we have the Chaos Mother with the actual ability of hers called Chaos Salvo improved by 420%, Infernal Bolt buffed by 70% for both Destro and Demonology, so it does quite a bit of damage. And then finally, the Overlord himself with the big Cleave ability, Wicked Cleave buffed by 830%, making the ability a substantial portion of your overall damage output in any dungeons that you run. I mean, he can just go in and then cleave up to, what, 3.6 million in a single cleave across the entire board to everybody around him, which is kind of a lot. I've seen this thing hit for 8 million as a Demonology before, which is just wild. For Destruction in particular, the actual ritual ability that you play around with, the passive, the one that summons all these demons to your aid, that one has been reduced to a 14-second duration, and the more soul shards you spend allows those demons to get churned out a little quicker. Every soul shard that you spend shortens the ritual until you get to summon a brand new demon, and you kind of just keep rolling with it over and over again. So soul shards now gain a little bit more of a different playstyle to it. Normally, soul shards for Demonology or Destro are used to empower or even cast certain abilities such as Chaos Bolt, such as your Shadowburn if you talent into it, such as Rain of Fire. But now, soul shards have almost like an alternative resource for Diabolist. Now, soul shards are used for Diabolic Ritual, so soul shards gain an additional value outside of it. Hellcaller also got a couple of buffs too for Destruction as well as Affliction, but mostly for Destro. Wither buffed up by 15%. Blackened Soul, which is another ability that interacts with the soul shards, also increased by 45%. With Blackened Soul, spending soul shards, any type of soul shards, whether you spend 2 or 1 or however many, increases the stack of Wither by 1. When Wither has above 8 stacks, it starts consuming those stacks, eating them to deal a significant bit of damage. And with Malevolence, you're able to double up the amount of stacks each and every single one of your soul shards generates for the Blackened Soul ability, plus gives you quite a bit of extra haste to churn out soul shards quicker. But in the current state for Destro, between Diabolist, between Hellcaller, right now, Soul Shard spending is the key, because all of these abilities that play off of the Soul Shard spending become a significant portion of either one of the two playstyles and a significant portion of the entire toolkit of a Destruction Warlock. Besides this, Destro saw a bunch of other buffs too, like Chaos Bolt buffed by 20%, Shadowburn buffed by 25%, Conflagrate also buffed by 25%, and Incinerate improved by 15%. They did make Ritual of Ruin take a little bit longer to really ramp up. At least in the blue post, it says that this soul shards that you need for Ritual Ruin are increased to 20 soul shards, and then with Master Ritualist you're able to reduce it by 5 less. So it is technically a little bit longer for you to achieve the Avatar of Destruction proc, which gives you an Orifin to shoot out Chaos Bolts but also generate your additional resources. But even with that, Destruction was still generating a lot of resources either way. And at the end of the day, what happened was big buffs to the hero talents encouraged soul shard spending, aggressive soul shard spending, where Warlocks focusing on generating and spending soul shards as efficiently as possible, with Chaos Bolt as an ability generally having much more value than Rain of Fire, unless you're mid-movement. And this was fine until soul shards get other uses outside of just casting Rain of Fire, Chaos Bolt, and Shadowburn. I mean, you still use them to cast those abilities, but now there's like an alternative usage out of it, so the focus changes from value spending to fast spending of soul shards in dungeons. And you can see the performance gains you get out of it just by churning out as many shards as you can. It doesn't even matter how much damage they do, because Diabolist and Hellcaller are such a significant portion of your overall damage. It is much better to churn soul shards. Essentially, this creates a playstyle where sitting on your resources is a DPS loss, but spending them as brazenly and as carelessly as possible essentially can mean DPS gain. So it doesn't even matter how you spend the soul shards, it's just spend, baby. Plus, both here Hellcaller as well as Diabolist provide you additional ways to generate more soul shards, with Hellcaller giving you an improved version of Immolate that also generates you soul shards, and there's other abilities that weave into soul shard generation. You get more efficient passive generation from Hellcaller. Diabolist encourages you to spend soul shards because it gives you soul shard generation through the Infernal Bolt. So the faster you can rotate through all of your demons and get the Chaos Mother again, Infernal Bolt can grant you even more soul shards, so you're encouraged to spend soul shards as aggressively as possible as either one of the two playstyles. This has created resurgence of the Fire Destro build, something we saw I think way back in Shadowlands last time, or maybe there was at some point a Fire Destro floating around here and there, somewhere between Shadowlands and Dragonflight, but I remember that being a prominent thing during the alpha of Shadowlands way back in the day. And there's a couple of talents that help this as well. Talents such as Power Overwhelming can further increase the soul shard value by granting you mastery for every soul shard that you spend. Getting a stack does not refresh the duration, but if you can churn out through a bunch of soul shards, this means you can generate a lot of mastery rather quickly. But also we have Pyrogenics, where enemies affected by Rain of Fire take 3% increased damage from your fire spells. This actually used to be 5% in a bit, but a couple of new nerfs came in, which we'll talk about in a second. But with Pyrogenics, you essentially can just maintain a damage buff against the target as long as they're standing near your Rain of Fire. This means that all you have to do is refresh Rain of Fire every 6.4 seconds to get a significant damage increase. 5% is a solid enough increase even in single target. So then the playstyle becomes all about cycling through the soul shards as quickly as possible, and people were even able to run some sims to see just how big and how I guess was the best way to put it, how degen the playstyle ends up being. And they even plugged it in the sims, early sims, beta stuff, not 100% accurate, but they found that even plugging in Rain of Fire as an ability that does 0 damage, has all the same elements of Pyrogenics and everything else, but it does 0 damage. It's actually more efficient to spam Rain of Fire, even if the ability does 0 damage, than it is casting Chaos Bolt, just so you can churn through your hero talent abilities far quicker. It's actually kind of insane in that regard. So it allows Destruction Warlocks to play a fully fire build where you kind of ignore the playstyle of Chaos Bolt, and Blizz tried to fix this one in a recent blue post, where they nerfed Pyrogenics damage by down from 5% to 3%. Avatar of Destruction, the overthing that you can summon that generates your soul shard fragments, instead of generating 1 fragment per half a second, it is now 1 fragment per second. So slow down the generation there. To slow down the generation of your Summon Infernal in the same way, 1 fragment a second instead of 1 fragment per half a second, as well as Infernal Bolt from the Chaos Mother ability that one now generates you 2 soul shards for Destro instead of 3, but you still get 3 as demonology though, so you don't have to worry about that whatsoever. So what did these nerfs do? Essentially absolutely nothing. Even if Rain of Fire did 0 damage, it is still more efficient and would be a bigger DPS gain than Chaos Bolt. This seems such a holistic problem for Destro, and with the expansion releasing in just a handful of weeks. I don't know if the word is worried per se specifically comes to mind, but I am concerned because it's like, how do we get here and how are we seeing holes now with the expansion arriving so soon? However, the Warlock community is trying to figure out some fixes, and there's been a lot of different ideas floating around as to how it could fix it, because don't get me wrong, it is very fun running around and just rain of firing as Destro, but there should be some nuance and there should be some skill, and at the end of the day you should care about how you spend those soul shards. It's one of the things that makes the class fun is the resource management, and the resources have to be there and they have to be meaningful, because if the resource is there but you have an infinite amount of it, you might as well remove the resource, you might as well remove the soul shards to begin with from Destro if they don't really matter that much, and you could generate them as easily as that. So there are potential fixes floating around right now in the Warlock community discords and other places, but I'm not a Warlock main, so I'm not suggesting any of these fixes as like my own idea. This is just what I've been able to read so far, and these are some of the ideas that come to mind. A lot of the fixes really try to find ways to address the disparity between Rain of Fire, Chaos Bolt, and the way that those two abilities interact with the hero specs. And the idea is you want to find as quick of a fix as you can in order to make sure that Destro does not come out literally spamming abilities willy-nilly, where things and rotational abilities don't really matter, and essentially you're not playing the class how it was designed at all. So some of the ideas have been either to slap a cast time on abilities such as Rain of Fire to make him a little bit more even with how you interact with Rain of Fire, or Chaos Bolt, where you end up outputting them in the same way, but you end up using one better for single target and the other better in AoE content, so there's a little bit of continuity of how either one would work. Though this will impact the mobility of Warlocks. If you have to cast Rain of Fire, it means if you're moving, you don't really have an easy way to spend your resources, so it's just not ideal, but that is one of the suggestions that I've seen. Another one would be to readjust the way that Chaos Bolt, Rain of Fire, and even Shadowburn to some degree work off of your abilities, primarily from your hero talents, like with Diabolist and the Soul Shard generation and Demon Summon. Maybe make it where Rain of Fire allows you to get those demons a little quicker in big AoE situations, but using Rain of Fire in single target isn't as effective, where you'll then be defaulted to using Chaos Bolt. And they could do something similar with the Hellcaller playstyle as well, and the Black and Soul ability. So just basically we'll have to really micromanage that. But then there's also a whole sect of Warlocks that's talking about like, yeah, we just need to go back to how resources used to work like 10 years ago, slow down the Soul Shard generation, but increase the amount of damage that we're able to put out with every single one of our bolts. So there's a whole nother set of discussion talking about now moving it from, hey, how do we adjust our social generation and abilities to work with hero talents, to, hey, we should probably go back to an older method of how Warlock worked. Maybe that will save it. But honestly, it's going to be very interesting to see how Blizz will end up approaching this kind of situation, because it definitely is a conundrum. Though that being said, I am, for the most part, liking how Diabolist feels impactful. I like how hard your demons hit, and I like how the ability has a bit more impact, a little bit more punch. And hopefully whatever they do, hopefully they will maintain some of that impact for their demons. Of course, tuning is gonna have to be an ongoing process, but I've just been loving how more integrated those demons are, and hopefully we'll see some remnants of this going forward. As for Destruction Warlock, I like the fact that they're fast-paced, but I also do miss when Chaos Bolt used to absolutely devour health bars with every single cast, where you didn't have a playstyle of like as many Chaos Bolts you would cast, but every time you did cast one, oh, they would do so much damage. It was super rewarding every single time. So I kind of miss those days, and I wonder if Warlocks could potentially return back to those days from like a decade ago. And that is something that is a topic of discussion right now in the Warlock community. However, hopefully whatever they do, hopefully it'll be a change based on the community and derived from the community. I mean, if they were able to adjust arcane mages and listen to the community feedback, hopefully they can do so here with Destruction as well. Now, with everything being said, I do want to thank all of you guys so much for watching this video, and I hope all of you enjoyed. Let me know what you think about all these Warlock changes, and how would you personally go about fixing them for the War Within, which is releasing very, very soon, in the comments down below. As always, if you guys enjoyed this video or found it informative, go ahead and give it a like. It helps me out with the algorithm tremendously. Also, join our community Discord, link to that in the description down below. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll see all of you guys in the next one.